Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to video number 2 in this How I Edit My Portraits video series. In the very first video, I pretty much covered everything that I do as far as editing my photos in Lightroom. So if you haven't seen that video yet, be sure to go check that one out first. It's important that you watch that one. It's definitely how I begin editing all of my photos. So you get to see that portion of it, and then from there we'll go ahead and we'll jump into this portion of the video, which is editing everything in Photoshop. So yeah, if you haven't seen the very first portion of this video, go check that out first. I'll link to it down below. Again, it's very important that you watch that video first. But if you've already seen that one, then welcome to video number 2. And in this video, we're gonna go ahead and walk you through all the steps that I do in Photoshop in order to edit my portraits. So let's head back on over to the computer and let's get started on this edit. So the first things first, we left off in Lightroom with our image right here. We've got all of our edits done and we're still in Lightroom. So the first thing we need to do is actually get this image from Lightroom over to Photoshop. So there's a couple different ways you can do it. There's a shortcut on Mac, it's gonna be Command E, or if you're on Windows, I believe it's Control E, or you can go up here to Photo, go down here to Edit In, and then you can edit in Adobe Photoshop CC, whatever version that you have, and you've got the shortcut right there as well. So I'm gonna go ahead and hit Command E on the keyboard, and then in just a couple seconds, this should get loaded into Photoshop, and we should be ready to go. All right, here we go. So we've got our photo loaded into Photoshop, so we're pretty much ready to get going. If you haven't really done a whole lot of editing in Photoshop, don't really worry about it. We're gonna go through all the tools that we need in order to do what we're doing, and you kind of learn as we go. I'm not gonna dive into each of the individual tools. That'll make this video take just way too long. This isn't meant to be like an intro to Photoshop video. This is meant to be a how I edit my photos in Photoshop, and so we'll go from there. So let's go ahead and jump into the actual edit itself. And as you can see here, we have got the photo that we are working with in Lightroom, and we've got the background layer in our layer tree, and we're pretty much all set to go. So the first thing we're gonna do is go ahead and create a couple copies of this background layer because, again, I prefer to work non-destructively. I wanna make sure that I always have a way of going back in my edits in order to undo things. That way, if I make a mistake, I can always go back and very quickly change things and then continue on with my edit without losing too much time. So in order to create our 2 copies, we're going to go ahead and hit Command J on the keyboard twice, and that's going to bring up 2 new layers. So we've got layer 1 copy, and these are both identical copies of the background layer. There's no difference between any of the 3 of these. The only difference is that this one's locked and then these 2 have different names. That's really it. So the first thing we're going to do is actually go ahead and start off by renaming these. So I'm going to go ahead and double click on layer 1 and rename this to color, and then we go ahead and click on layer 1 copy and rename that to texture. Now, the reason why we're doing this is because we're beginning a process known as frequency separation. I didn't really dive into that. Let's explain that for a second. So frequency separation is the first thing that I do in Photoshop on my portraits. And if you're not familiar with what frequency separation is, essentially it's a process for removing all of the texture from the skin and all the color from the skin and putting them on separate layers. Now, by texture, I mean pretty much anything you can feel like on your face or on the skin if you were to run your hand over your face. And then color obviously is the color. It's the things you can't feel with your fingers. And we want to separate those into 2 separate layers because it's going to give us a lot more flexibility when we go into our edit. It's going to allow us to really fine tune our retouching, and in terms of removing, say, wrinkles or any sort of acne or scars, things like that. And then it's also going to allow us to be able to affect the color without necessarily affecting the texture. It just gives us a much cleaner overall image. It gives us much more flexibility in what we're able to do in terms of the retouch. So that's why we're doing it, and you'll kind of get a better idea of why we're doing this as we move along in through the tutorial. So let's just go ahead and keep on going. We've got our 2 layers now. We've got 1 texture, we've got 1 color, and it's important to go ahead and rename these in the same order. Don't get these mixed up because we're gonna be doing a certain order. So first thing now, we're gonna go back up to the texture layer. We're gonna click this little eyeball to turn it off so that way it's no longer visible. I'm gonna go down here, make sure your color layer is selected. And then the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna remove all the texture from this layer. We're gonna do that by blurring the image. So to blur the image, we're going to, with the layer selected, go up here to filter, go down to blur, not blur gallery, go up to blur, and then we're gonna go over here to Gaussian blur. And then what we're gonna wanna do is select a value of the blur, or radius value here, I should say, that basically removes all the texture. So if I bring the radius down really far, you can see that there's still some texture on the skin, and then as you bring it up, it's gonna go ahead and remove that. So we wanna make sure all the texture is gone, but we also wanna make sure that all these colors start to blend together. And I usually find for most images that somewhere around, usually around 10 to 20, in that range somewhere. Now right here at around 10 looks pretty good. So I'm gonna go ahead and leave it right there. That looks good to me. I'm gonna go ahead and hit okay and accept that change. And then so now we've removed the texture from this color layer, and now we just have the colors, and we have the colors kind of blending together nice and evenly. So next things next, we need to go ahead and remove the texture from this layer. So I went ahead and turned it back on by hitting the little eyeball, little checkbox there. So now the layer is now visible. And again, so texture is a direct copy of background layer. We've made no changes to the texture layer yet. That's why it looks identical to the background, but we're gonna change that here in a moment. So with your texture layer selected, we're gonna go ahead and go up here to image. I'm gonna go down here to apply image, which is gonna bring up this dialog box. Now, within this dialog, you're probably gonna have a few things as default. It should say merged, which it does. So the first thing we're gonna do under this layer section is take it from merge and select color. So we're selecting this color layer down here in our layer tree. Then we're gonna go here to the blending mode section. We're gonna hit that drop down and we're gonna go to subtract. Now it should auto-populate with opacity of 100%, a scale of 2, and an offset of 128. If your window does not pop up with those defaults, be sure to go ahead and enter those values for opacity, scale, and offset. Again, 100 for opacity, 2 for scale, 128 for offset. Once you have those, you should be good to go. Go ahead and hit OK to accept that. And then you'll see that this layer kind of turns this weird kind of funny gray, but you do have all of the texture on this layer. You can see here. Which is exactly what we want. The only difference is we just don't want it to look gray. So what we're gonna do is go over here to the layer tree, and then just above where we have our layers, there's gonna be this drop down where it says normal. Go ahead and select that. Again, that's gonna be your blending mode, and we're gonna go down here and select the blending mode of linear light. Now, once we do that, you can see that the image, again, looks like it did normally straight out of camera, or straight from Lightroom, I should say, which is great. So what we've done now is we've separated the skin texture and the skin color onto 2 separate layers, which are these 2 right here. So I'm gonna go ahead and turn off the background layer. And again, we still have the same image. It looks exactly the same, but if I go ahead and turn off the color layer as well, we're back to just the texture. And if I turn the color layer on and turn the texture layer off, we're back to just the color. If we combine these 2 layers together, we've got our original image, which is exactly what we wanted. We've got the color on one layer, texture on the other, and now we're good to go. So the next thing I'm gonna do is go ahead and select both of these by, selecting texture, hold shift, select color, both are selected, Command G or Control G to group them together, and then I'm gonna go ahead and double click on group 1 and rename that to something like frequency sep or freak sep for short, to identify that as my frequency separation layer. Now normally I don't rename all of these things. I've done it so many times, I don't need to, I know where everything's at. We're really just doing this for the sake of the tutorial. Once you get comfortable with this and you've done it a half dozen or a dozen times, you probably won't want to rename these things every time either. But it's just something to keep in mind. You don't have to rename them. I simply am doing it for this tutorial to keep it easier to follow along with for you guys. All right, so we've got our frequency separation group or layer, so to speak. And again, if we turn off this group, we've got nothing. And if we turn it back on, we have 2 layers which together produce what appears to be the original image that we had from Lightroom, which is perfect. So now what we're gonna do is, along the name of non-destructive editing, we're gonna create a couple more layers within our frequency separation group. Now these next 2 layers are simply going to be layers that we're gonna be working on. And again, this is simply a step. You don't even have to do this next step. This is simply just something I do in order to make it easier to go back in time. If I ever make a mistake, it just makes the process easier. I can go back and remove the mistakes much easier and start from scratch without actually having to go all the way back to the beginning. I can just go to the back of, or just go back to the beginning of working with the texture layer, or going back to the beginning of working with the color layer. So again, I'll show you what I mean as we go along. So I'm gonna go ahead and select the color layer, hit Command G again, we're done, that's all we need to do. The only thing I might do is rename this just to make it easier to follow along with, and rather than having that named color copy, I'll go ahead and rename that as color working, because that is gonna be the layer that we are working on. Hit enter to accept that name change. Now we're gonna go ahead and select the texture layer, and then we're gonna go ahead and hit Command J again, and then we're gonna get another layer. Now when you do that with the texture layer, you're gonna notice your image all of a sudden appears overly sharpened, and that's because you now have 2 copies of this texture layer. So in order to get rid of that effect, what we're gonna do is with the texture layer copy, or the texture copy layer selected, go back up to your blending mode, go back to normal, and then now it looks gray again. Follow along with me, I know this is confusing, just do it a bunch of times. After you do this like a half dozen or a dozen times, it'll all make sense to you. It won't be as confusing. But then what we're gonna do is go ahead and hit the Command key, the Option key on your keyboard, and then just hover your mouse like right between these two layers right here. So as you see, as I cross between that boundary between those two layers, you get that little cursor with the downwards arrow and the white square that pops up. Once you have that, holding the Option key, you see that cursor, go ahead and hit your mouse button. And then what that's going to do is create a stand-in layer. So now this texture copy layer is standing in for the texture layer. So everything we do on this texture layer is being applied, or this texture copy layer, everything we do on that layer is being applied to the texture layer. But if we make a mistake to the texture copy layer, we can just delete it and create a new one from the texture layer without having to go and completely redo the frequency separation group again. If that doesn't make sense, just rewatch the video a couple times or just go through the whole frequency process with the frequency separation process for yourself a few times and you'll see what I mean. You'll see why this is useful. So we're gonna go ahead and do that. And then the last thing I'll do is rename texture copy to texture working. Again, just to identify that as the layer that we are going to be working on. I'm gonna hit enter to accept the name change. And now we're good to go. We've got our frequency separation group or layers created, and now we can actually begin going in and manipulating the photo itself and begin removing things like blemishes or wrinkles or any sort of scars or say some acne, loose hairs, whatever it may be that we want to get rid of out of our image. We can now go and do that on our frequency separation layer and have a lot of control over that process. So let's get started with that. And the way I'm gonna do it, or the way I always typically do it, is I start with the texture layer. I typically go through and start removing things like blemishes. So any sort of acne or scars or wrinkles or loose hairs, anything like that, I go through and I typically do that on the texture layer first. And then I go back and I work on the color layer. So let's get started on the texture stuff. So in order to do that, I'm gonna go ahead and hit J on my keyboard. Actually, I'm gonna go ahead and select the texture working layer first, then hit J on my keyboard. And what that's going to do is bring up my healing brush tool. Now, there's a couple different versions of the healing brush tool. There's the healing brush tool itself, and then there's also a spot healing brush tool. So if you see on the left-hand side here where I'm hovering my mouse, this one right here with the little dotted circle behind the Band-Aid, that is your spot healing brush tool. That one I typically don't use. I use the one below it, which is the healing brush tool. The main difference between the two is simply one, it basically creates, it chooses a selection for you to replace the new blemish with. So you're replacing the blemish with whatever the program deems to be the best type of texture to replace with. That sounds really confusing. Well, let's just go ahead and start doing this. I'll kind of explain it along the way, all right? So with the healing brush tool selected, and again, if yours isn't selected by default, just go over here in your tool panel and select it. And then I'm gonna go ahead and zoom in a little bit closer. And then I'm gonna start removing a few of these little bumps. So I'm gonna go ahead and bring my brush size down. And again, as far as brush size, you want something that is going to be fairly small, just a little bit bigger than whatever blemish you're looking to remove. And then the hardness I always put down at 0. I want the hardness to be very, very soft and basically no hardness. I want a very, very soft brush is what I want. So that's what I have selected. I'm gonna go ahead and use those to start removing some of these bumps. And so in order to use the healing brush tool, the first thing you need to do is you actually have to tell the healing brush tool where you want to sample from, because essentially what it's going to do is it's going to take a clean area of skin and it's going to take that clean area of skin and put it over the top of the not so clean area of skin. So for example, right here we see we've got a little bump. So I'm gonna hold the Option key, and when I do that, the cursor changes to this little crosshair, and that crosshair is me telling, or is the tool that I use in order to tell Adobe where to sample clean skin from. So I'm gonna sample clean skin from right here because the texture is very simple, it's very nearby, but it's clean. So with the Option key held down, I'm gonna go ahead and tap to make or click your mouse button in order to make your selection right there. And then now Adobe knows that that's where I want to sample from. And then as I start to paint over that, you'll see a little plus sign pop up right where I selected. That's telling me where it's sampling from. And now you can see that little bump is gone, and it looks like there was nothing over there because it used a very clean area of skin to replace the not so clean area of skin. And when you're doing this process, it's important to keep reselecting new clean areas of skin because you want to make sure you're selecting from areas that are very nearby the blemish that you're removing. So I'm gonna go ahead for this little bump right here. I'm gonna select the area of clean skin right over here, and then I'm just gonna go ahead and paint over it. It's very simple. A little blemish, resample, paint over it, resample, paint over it, resample, paint over it, resample, paint over it. And this is the process. You select clean area of skin. I'm gonna select from right here and then just go over that little spot, select, go over, select, go over. And this is really what you're gonna be doing in order to remove blemishes, whether or not it's little, so acne scars or little bumps, little whatever it may be, you know, if it's a wrinkle, a loose hair, whatever. So those are just little bumps right there. Let's say we've got this little hair right here that we wanna remove. Zoom in a little bit closer. I might even bring my brush size down just a little bit. And then I'm just gonna select nearby, or like right here, and then I'm gonna start painting over that hair, selecting nearby, and just little bits, removing that little piece of hair. And that's really all there is to frequency separation as far as replacing texture. Now, one thing that I will note is, or I'll try to like make a little bit clearer, is that you wanna make sure that you're choosing texture of skin, you know, from a sample area that's very similar to the area that you wanna paint over. So for example, right, let's say I wanna remove this little red spot on her nose, right? Well, if I sample from her lips, right, the lips are obviously a very different texture than her nose, right? So if I select from her lips and then try to paint over that nose area, you can see that the texture doesn't line up. You can see right there, it's just a little bit different. It doesn't quite make sense. If I select from right there and start painting over her nose, you can see the texture just does not look right because the texture of her lips is different than the texture of her nose, and it's trying to put basically lip texture on her nose, which doesn't make any sense. So again, like, so for right here, I'm gonna select from her cheek to replace onto her cheek. From her nose, I'm gonna select right from her nose and replace over her nose. Or vice versa, if I wanna paint over this little spot on her lips, I'll select from nearby on her lips. Actually, that wasn't a very good selection there, that's better. And that's really the nutshell of going through and doing a lot of this blemish removal, is just going through and using the healing brush tool and selecting clean areas of skin nearby the area that you want to replace, and then just painting over it. And it's a time-consuming process. It can be, depending on, you know, the individual skin. Now, Cassandra's got very clean skin, so this really won't take me very long. But this is essentially the process, and you just go through and you repeat it until you're happy. Now, as far as what to remove and what not to remove, my typical rule of thumb is, if it's something that is permanent, like if it's a freckle or a mole or something like that, something that really defines their look, I'm not gonna remove it. If it's part of them and it's part of who they are, I'm not gonna remove it, not unless they ask me to. If they ask me to, then fine. But for the most part, I'm not going to if it's something that defines them. Now, things that are temporary, like acne, or even like an acne scar, something like that, I might remove. A little red spot, a little cut, you know, those types of things are gonna be the things that are removed. Things that aren't really part of them, it doesn't really define who they are. It's just a temporary blemish that's there, and you know, the next week it'd be gone anyway. So those are the type of things that I typically remove. And beyond that, it just takes a little bit of your own self-judgment, a little bit of your own common sense to kind of go through and figure out what looks good to you without going too far. Because at the end of the day, what I don't want to do is make them look like somebody that they're not. I don't want them to look like a cartoon. I don't want them to look fake or artificial. I want them to be themselves. And at the end of the day, I want it to almost be, you know, I want somebody to look at the portrait and almost ask if anything was even done to it. Obviously, if you look at the before and after, you'll definitely be able to notice the difference. But I want it to be very subtle. I want it to be very light-handed, and just kind of clean things up and smooth things out a little bit. And that's what I'm doing right here. And really, honestly, there's not a whole lot more I really see that I want to do. And for the sake of time, I'll probably cut this short. I would maybe spend a little bit more time if I was doing this for real. But for the sake of the tutorial, I think you guys get the idea. So I'm gonna go ahead and move on and finish up the blemish removal on the texture layer. Maybe a couple little spots right here. Okay, that's good. I'm gonna go ahead and end that right there. That's pretty good. Now, if you go over here to your layer tree, you can go ahead and toggle your eyeball and you can go on and off and see the before and after. And that's what we've done so far. Okay, cool. So now that we've gone through and we've removed a bunch of the blemishes or the bumps or whatever else you want to remove, those stray hairs, now I'm gonna go ahead and start working on the color layer. So I'm gonna go ahead and select the color layer. And now for the color, what I typically do is I actually turn the texture layer off because it makes it a little bit easier for me to see what's going on and see what it is that I want to do. Now, the whole purpose of working on the color layer is to smooth out and blend all the colors together. You want a nice smooth transition from all the colors, from the shadows to the highlights, from different skin tones to other skin tones. You want all that just to be a nice smooth transition. That's what we're really looking for on the color layer. Now, typically the first thing that I do when I'm working on the color layer is I do kind of large swaths of skin at the same time. And I do that by using the lasso tool. So right now I've actually got the polygonal lasso tool selected. I'm gonna go over here on my toolbar on the left and select the regular circular freeform lasso tool, if that makes any sense. Yeah, so I'm gonna go ahead and select that guy right there. And then what I'm going to do is, well, actually I'm gonna go ahead and do a test selection. So I'm gonna go ahead and just draw a circle and then I'm gonna hit Q on the keyboard. Now this is gonna give you like a range mask. And basically anywhere that's not red is going to be what's selected. And what I'm really looking for is the fuzziness of this boundary layer. I want it to be a nice smooth transition. I don't want it to be like too smooth and too spread out and disperse, but I also don't want it to be a sharp edge. So I want a nice middle ground, and that actually looks pretty good to me. So I'm gonna go ahead and hit Q again, and then I'm gonna hit Command D to deselect. And then now I'm gonna go ahead and do this for real now that I'm happy with the actual feathering of that selection. So I'm gonna go ahead and just select all around her forehead just like this. And then I'm gonna go ahead and close that off. And then now we've got our selection. And what I'm gonna do is go up to Filter. I'm gonna go to Blur. I'm gonna go to Gaussian Blur just like we did before when we were creating our original color layer. And then now I'm gonna look for a radius that tends to I'm gonna look for a radius that blends these colors together pretty well. And usually somewhere between 10 and 20 looks pretty good. I'm gonna go ahead and bump that up to about a 12 and call that okay. And then we're good. Okay, Command D to deselect. And then I'm gonna go ahead and just repeat that process on the different areas of her face. And I try to keep it fairly small. I don't do the entire face all at once. I try to select small sections. So I'm gonna go right underneath her eye. I'm gonna go ahead and bring up the Gaussian blur layer again. And that time I just use the keyboard shortcut. Otherwise you just go back up to Filter, Gaussian blur again. And that looks good to me. So I'm gonna hit okay. Command D to deselect. Now I'm gonna go down here a little bit further down on her cheek and select this area. And now this time I'm actually gonna hit Control Command F. And what that's going to do is it's gonna repeat the last filter I used. So if you go up here to Filter, we've got Blur, Gaussian blur, right? So we've done that a couple times. Now at the very top of the filter page, you'll actually see the very last filter that was used. And there's a shortcut built into Photoshop that allows you to quickly reapply that same filter. So in this case, again, the last filter we used was Gaussian blur. So if you hit Control Command F, it's going to go ahead and repeat that filter. It's a very quick, easy way of repeating that over and over again if you're happy with the blur value. So that's what I'm going to go ahead and do. And then I'm going to make another small selection and just kind of keep going and finish this up. Okay, so there we go. I've gone through, I've kind of done that process over and over again on the different areas of her face. I've started to blend the colors together. So now what I'm gonna do is go ahead and turn the texture layer back on and see what that looks like as a complete image. And then again, just like before, if we go over here and hit the eyeball, we can go ahead and turn that layer on and off. We can see the before and the after. So we can see it just kind of, it starts to spread the light out a little bit more. It makes the color of her face a little bit more even and spread out. It just kind of makes everything look a little bit softer. And I'm gonna go ahead and clean up a couple more areas. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm gonna turn the texture layer back off. I'm gonna go back in here and just keep working this a little bit more. There's a couple more areas I see that I want to work with. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. Okay, that's better. And I'm gonna go ahead again, we can turn this off, we can turn this on and do the before and after and see how it got softened up a little bit. All right, cool. Now that's a beginning step. Now, the next thing I typically do on the color layer is I get a little bit more refined with my actual blending of the colors now. Now, using the lasso tool and selecting large sections of the face and then using a Gaussian blur is kind of like the, that's the coarse version of doing things. That's the kind of the rough way of doing it, or the quick way of doing it. And that's usually the first way I begin going about spreading out the skin tones. Now, the next step is going to actually involve going in with a brush tool and actually painting different colors onto the skin. And I'll keep in mind that this process that I'm about to show you, it takes some time to get used to. It definitely takes a little bit of effort and a little bit of practice to get better at it. The first few times I did it, I wasn't really super happy with the results, but once you get a lot better at it, it really does make a world of difference in terms of what you're able to do as far as smoothing out the skin tones. So let's go ahead and jump on into that and show you guys how I do that. So with the color working layer selected, I'm gonna go ahead and hit the B tool on my keyboard to bring up the brush tool, or you can go over here to the left-hand side. You can find your brush tool right here. It's this little object right there. Now you've got the brush and the pencil tool. If your pencil tool is selected by default, just go ahead and hold down this little button right here and you'll have the option to select the brush tool. All right, cool. So now I'm gonna go ahead and zoom in a little bit. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start working on this area right here. You can see where there's this dark area that doesn't blend super smoothly into the rest of her forehead. So what I wanna do is blend that out. So the next thing I'm gonna do is go ahead and hit I on my keyboard to bring up the eyedropper, or again, you can go over here to your toolbar and you'll see it right here. Here's your eyedropper tool. You can go ahead and select it that way. Now with your eyedropper tool selected, go up here to sample size, and you wanna make sure you have something like 11 by 11 or 31 by 31 selected. If you've got a very zoomed in portrait, maybe go with 31 by 31. Since this one's a little bit further away, it's kind of like a full body or a half body shot, I'm gonna go ahead and select 11 by 11. But what you don't want is point sample select. You do not want that because it's only gonna be sampling color from a single point. What you wanna do is have the eyedropper tool select from a range of pixels and then give you the average, which is gonna give you a much cleaner result. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. 11 by 11 average, great. I'm gonna hit B on the keyboard again to take me back to the brush tool, and so here we go. So now again, I'm gonna make my brush a little bit bigger. And again, I still want it to be very soft. It's got a hardness of 0, which is great. Now, one more other thing that I'll make mention of when you have your brush tool selected, have your opacity at 100, but make sure your flow is quite low. So I'm gonna go ahead and change that to 10. Flow of like about 5 or 10 is gonna be about what you want. That way you're not producing a very heavy-handed effect with the brush tool while we're doing this. So now what we're gonna do is, in order to blend this skin tone into the rest of our forehead, we're gonna go ahead and hit the option key, or I'm sorry, the control key. It's the option key. I can't get my key straight. Hold the option key just like when we're using the healing brush tool in order to make our selection of skin. We're going to do the same thing, but make our selection of color. So we're gonna select the color that's right along this edge. Right where these two colors begin to meet, I'm gonna go ahead and select something right in the middle and get a good average. And then I'm gonna go ahead and just start painting over that area. And then I'm gonna keep reselecting right along that edge. That way I can kind of paint in and just fade that color just a little bit more. And that's all we're really trying to do. We're just trying to fade these colors together just a little bit better. Make them a little bit more smooth. That way it's not as pronounced. And that's what I'm gonna do, again, right there along the edge. And again, you may not see what I'm looking at. It might take you a little bit of time to get an eye for what I'm looking at. It's very subtle. But again, I'm just kind of going in and selecting colors and just painting back and trying to blend in the skin tone just a little bit and make it very, very subtle. Okay, cool. That looks a little bit better to me, maybe a little bit right there. And then we can do the same thing along this harsh shadow right here. We can go ahead and make that shadow a little less harsh by just selecting colors right along that edge and then just kind of painting over it. I might make my brush a little smaller. Just selecting right there along the edge and then just kind of painting along it. And then that's gonna go ahead and make that shadow just a little bit softer, a little bit less harsh, and a little bit more pleasing in the eye. We can do the same thing right here. Make my brush a little bigger, select right along that edge, and just paint along it. And we're gonna go ahead and soften that shadow just a little bit and make it a little less noticeable. Okay, cool. And then we can do the same thing around the eye. I want to take out this little dark spot that's right around her eye. So I'm gonna go ahead and select right nearby, select the lighter color, and then paint over the darker color. And then that's gonna go ahead and just kind of brighten up that area right underneath her eye. And that's gonna look a lot better in the finished result. And again, we're just blending all these skin tones together. And if you can't see it on your monitor, you should be able to see it on yours. I know sometimes when you record these videos, they don't always do the best job of kind of showing you all the detail. Sometimes seeing those little small differences in the color gradation can be hard on a recorded video. But again, if you're doing it on yours, just follow along. You should see what I mean. And again, we're just kind of doing the same thing. I'm gonna make my brush a little bit smaller. Make sure we're not painting over her lips with like a brown color because that would look not good. And again, just kind of softening up these shadows and spreading out the skin tones a little bit. Okay, so let's go ahead and turn our texture layer back on and see what we've got. All right, so with the color layer selected, I'm gonna go ahead and toggle that off and on, and now we can see the before and the after. And we can see we did a little bit of painting underneath her eye there just a minute ago, and that kind of brightened things up a little bit, which is good. I'm actually gonna do a little bit more work in there. I feel like it's not quite even enough. So I'm gonna go ahead and again, just sample and just keep kind of painting around that area. Actually, I feel like that was too dark. All right, so just give me a minute. I'm gonna fast forward through the video through this section, and I'm just gonna kind of clean up this area a little bit more. All right, so I think I'm done with the color layers. So I've pretty much done everything that I think I really want to do for this image, and I am fairly happy with it. So what I'm gonna do is go ahead and select the frequency separation layer, and then again, I can go ahead and toggle this entire group as one whole unit. And then we can see here's the image that we had when we brought it in from Lightroom, and now this is the image after we've gone through frequency separation. So it's a very subtle difference, but at the same time, you can see that a lot of the blemishes have been removed, the skin tones have been evened out a little bit, and it's just overall kind of cleans things up a little bit more. And I could probably spend more time on this and make it a little bit more thorough, but again, for the sake of the tutorial and the sake of time, I don't want to spend a ton of time going through this. You guys get the idea. Just go until it looks good to you, go until it looks happy, or until you're happy with it, and then we should be good to go. So that is, in a nutshell, the frequency separation process. Again, it takes a little bit of practice to kind of get used to it. There's a lot that's involved. You can really spend a lot of time really getting deep down into the nitty-gritty of it in terms of just spending a lot of time removing, loose hairs or blemishes or, fixing skin color. You can really get caught up with that and spend a lot of time on frequency separation. But yeah, just go ahead, have some fun with it, get used to the process, do it a few times, and I think you'll definitely see the power of it as well as the value of it after you've gone through it a few times. So yeah, let's go ahead and move on to the next section, and that is going to be dodging and burning. So once I'm done with frequency separation, typically the next thing I do is I work on dodging and burning. So dodging and burning is really, in a nutshell, it's essentially selectively either bringing up the exposure or reducing the exposure, or essentially giving extra emphasis to the highlights or the shadows. Let's just go ahead and actually work through the process of doing some dodging and burning, and then it should make a little bit more sense to you as far as what that actually means. So in order to get our dodging and burning layer set up, let's go ahead and do that. So we're gonna go down here to our toolbar here. We're gonna go ahead and we're going to select our curves selection layer. And then we're gonna go ahead and I'm gonna start off with the dodge layer. So in order to do that, I'm gonna go ahead and take this curves line right here and just click somewhere in the middle and just go ahead and drag it up, and it's gonna go ahead and make your entire image a little bit brighter. So I'm gonna go to right about there. That looks pretty good to me. I don't wanna make it too ridiculous, but that looks good right about there. I'm gonna go ahead and collapse that. Now you've got your actual curves adjustment layer, and then you've got your actual, you've actually got your layer mask right here. My brain's not working. I can't think of the names of anything right now, but with your layer mask selected, you're gonna go ahead and go to your keyboard, hit Command I or Control I on a Windows, and you're gonna go ahead and invert that layer mask. Now, if you remember back to video 1 when we were talking about sharpening and layer masks, or the masking feature within the sharpening section of Lightroom, this is the layer mask in Photoshop. It's very similar to that. What we're talking about is anywhere you see black on this layer mask, it means the effect is not being applied. If we were to hit Command I again and flip it to white, you can see that the curves adjustment layer is now being applied to the entire image, and we know that because the layer mask is completely white. Now, if we want to see the layer mask much larger, we can go ahead and hit the Option key and then click on the layer mask with our mouse, and then it'll load up the layer mask as a full image. Hold down the Option key and select your layer mask again, and it'll hide it and bring you back to your original image. But we're gonna go ahead and with the layer mask selected, Command I, we're gonna fill that layer mask with black. That way the effect is not being applied to the image at all. And then we're gonna go ahead and selectively apply that curves adjustment layer to the parts of the image that we want. But we're gonna do that in a minute. The next thing we're gonna do is just create the burn layer, and then we'll create a dodge and burn group. And then we'll actually get started with the process of doing the dodging and burning. So we're gonna go ahead and create one more adjustment layer. So we're gonna go down here to our adjustment layer panel, and we're gonna go to curves again. So we're gonna have 2 curves layers. But this time what we're gonna do is we're gonna take this curve and we're gonna go ahead and drag it the opposite way. We're gonna bring it down to something like that. That looks good. And then again, with our layer mask selected, Command or Control I to invert it to black. That way we're hiding this layer mask, or we're hiding this curves adjustment layer rather. So that way we're not seeing it applied to our image. Now, again, with the, I'm gonna go ahead and rename these. So curves 2, I'm gonna go ahead and rename that to burn. I'm gonna rename curves 1 to dodge. And then I'm gonna go ahead with dodge selected, hold down Shift and select burn as well. That way both are selected. Command G or Control G to group them. And then I'm gonna rename group 1 to dodge and burn, not burb. Dodge and burn, okay, that looks good to me. We can go ahead and expand our dodge and burn folder, and now we have our dodge and our burn layers. So I'm gonna go head down to dodge and select the dodge layer mask, and now we're gonna go ahead and begin to selectively dodge our image. And again, this is essentially just bringing up the exposure in the areas that we wanna bring up the exposure. It's basically very controlled, very specific, and thought out application of exposure to the image in order to highlight the highlights, if that makes any sense. It will in a second, just follow along with me. Okay, Layer mask selected, we're gonna go ahead and hit B on our keyboard to make sure our brush is selected. Now, the way it works with layer masks is in order to reveal the layer mask, you need to paint the opposite color on it. So right now the layer mask is filled with black because we're hiding this curves adjustment layer. So in order to reveal that curves adjustment layer, we're gonna go ahead and paint white on our layer mask. If that didn't make any sense, just bear with me, rewatch this section a couple times or just follow along. It'll eventually make sense to you, I swear it will. So again, we got our brush selected and we wanna make sure we're painting white on our layer mask. Now we can go down here to the lower left, we've got this little color panel and we can see that our brush selection is currently white. If it was flipped to black, you just hit X on your keyboard and it'll toggle that color, or you can hit this little double arrow icon and it'll also do the same thing. And then if you want to go back and make sure you have the default colors of white and black selected, you can hit this icon right here, or you can hit D on your keyboard. But as it is, we already have the white selected for our paint color or our brush color, and we're going to be painting white on this layer mask in order to reveal the curves adjustment layer below it. So let's actually go in here and start doing some dodging. So with our brush selected, I'm gonna bring my brush size down a little bit. And again, if you notice, the hardness is very soft. It's at 0 or 1%. And I'm gonna go ahead and just start painting in a little bit of exposure into the whites of our eyes. Again, also make sure your opacity is at 100% and your flow is something like 5 or 10%. So I'm gonna go ahead and paint in a little bit there. I'm gonna paint in a little bit of exposure right there, right where you can see the reflection from the octabox from the off-camera flash. Same thing in the other eye, paint in a little bit in the whites of our eye, paint in right over the top of where that reflection is. We've got a little highlight right there above her eye. I'm gonna paint that in. Same thing on this side, paint that in. You can see a natural highlight right there. I'm gonna go ahead and accentuate that. Same thing on this side. Same thing over here and right here. And really the main reason why we're doing this, it's the same reason why, women apply makeup to their eyes. We're trying to improve the contrast. We're trying to make the eyes more contrasty. That's one of the reasons why we're doing this. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna paint a little bit of exposure just below her eye as well. Kind of remove some of those darker areas. Same thing on this side, bring that up just a little bit, nice and soft. Not gonna go too crazy with it. That looks pretty good to me. Now let's go ahead and just toggle this on and off real quick and I can show you the difference and show you what we're actually doing by dodging. So that's before, that's after, before, that's after. Again, we're bringing up the exposure in very selected areas that we want to make a little bit brighter so that we can increase the contrast and make the image look a little bit more dynamic. So again, and typically when it comes to dodging, I pretty much am going to go through and I'm going to kind of give a little bit of boost to any of the natural highlights that are already in the image. So right here along her nose, for example, you can see a little bit of a natural highlight right there. So I'm gonna go ahead and remove my brush size down just a little bit and just paint in a little bit of an exposure right there. And basically I'm dodging her nose. Same thing on the lips, there's a natural highlight right there. I'm gonna go ahead and paint that in a little bit. There's a little bit of a natural highlight right above her lip, and there usually is. I'm gonna go ahead and paint that in just a little bit. Again, if we toggle that on and off, you can see the before and after, and you can see how it's already beginning to make the image look a little bit more 3D, right? It's starting to make the image look more dynamic, more three-dimensional, and that's what we want. So again, a little bit of a natural highlight along her cheek. I'm gonna go ahead and paint that in. Right here along her chin, brighten that up, and right here again. And if I wanted to, I can maybe just a little bit along her forehead, and that looks pretty good. Now there's also some natural highlights in her hair I want to accentuate, so I'm gonna go ahead and do that. Right there, right here. Zoom out just a bit, and then all along here, I'm gonna do that as well. And right now, it maybe doesn't even look like I'm painting anything on the image because it's so subtle, and that's exactly what we want. We want subtle changes. We don't want really heavy-handed stuff because you don't want to make it look like, you don't want people to look at the image and be like, oh, clearly that guy dodged and burned that area. You don't want that. If people can tell that you dodged and burned your image, you probably did it wrong. It really should be very subtle. It should look very natural. All right, go ahead, and same thing, like it doesn't have to be just on the face either. I know this is a portrait, but you can go ahead and dodge and burn other areas of the image as well. So I'm gonna go right there along her sweater, right there along that edge, right there. And again, this is going to help make the image look more three-dimensional and just a little bit more refined and polished. Right there along her jeans. There's also a little bit of a highlight there, and here along the chair, along the arm. And again, this is all to make the image more dynamic, more three-dimensional, and bring it alive. Okay, that looks pretty good to me. I'm happy with that. I'm gonna call that good for dodging, and now we're gonna switch over and go ahead and start doing some burning. So with our layer mask on our burn layer selected, we're gonna go ahead and start selectively burning our image, or AKA bringing down the exposure. So typically when it comes to burning, I'll typically do that pretty much anywhere where hair meets skin. So I'm gonna go ahead and start here along the eyebrows and just bring that down a little bit. Now, she's got really great eyebrows, and this isn't something that anybody has to do. It's not that she needs this, it's just simply everybody can benefit from it a little bit. Again, right where hair meets skin, I'm gonna go ahead and paint in a little bit of a burn layer right there. That looks good to me. Now there's a lot of contrast all along this area. I'm not gonna go too crazy with burning those shadows, but maybe just right around there to accentuate her jawline a little bit, and maybe back along this side, along her cheek. That might be a little bit too much. So if you do a little bit too much, you can either just Control Z to undo the last brush stroke, or if you went too far with it, the other thing you do is just go ahead and hit X on your keyboard. Again, that's gonna flip your brush color. So now we're painting with black, and what we're gonna be doing here is we're gonna be hiding the curves adjustment layer by painting black on the layer mask, right? Because again, remember, anything that you paint black on a layer mask, it's gonna hide the effect. Anything you paint white on a layer mask, it's going to reveal the effect. So that looks a little better. I cleaned that up just a little bit. And so let's go ahead and back out and see what that looks like. I'm happy with that. And then again, just like with the dodging, you can go ahead and you can dodge areas of the image other than just her face. So if I wanted to make sure I go back to painting with white, I can go ahead and kind of dodge right along her sweater there, maybe along this area, along the corners, maybe down here. Whatever looks good to you, just go ahead and go for it. You know, there's no wrong or right answer. Just do what looks good to you. Even maybe right along that wall there, that we're focused more on her, maybe back there. Okay, so here we go, before burning and then after burning. And again, you know what? I don't really like this little area of burn along her cheek. I feel like it's too much. I'm gonna go back and remove that. And again, I'm gonna go ahead and do that just by flipping the color of my brush back to black. So I'm painting black back onto my layer mask, and it's going to hide that effect, or at least make it a little bit more subtle. So there it is. It's still there just a little bit, but I brought it way back. And yeah, I'm much happier with that. That looks way better to me. Okay, quit. So I'm gonna go ahead and select the Dodge and Burn folder, and then I'm gonna toggle that on and off, and then you can see the before and after. So this is before dodging and burning, and that's after. Again, the main thing here is we're just making the image look more three-dimensional. We're making it come alive a little bit, making it look more dynamic. That's really what you're doing with dodging and burning. So yeah, that makes it look a lot better in my opinion. Again, you're painting dark around the eyes, you're painting white inside the white of the eyes, you're painting white along the reflection in her eye, because that's going to go ahead and increase the contrast around her eyes and make her eyes pop a little bit more. So yeah, that's kind of really my process for dodging and burning on portraits. It's pretty straightforward, and that's pretty much what I do for most of my images. So cool, that's dodging and burning. Let's go ahead and keep moving on. So the next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna work on sharpening. I usually go through and I try to sharpen the image, the part of the image that's already in focus, which is typically gonna be her eye. And I'll also do a little bit of sharpening along the lips. So I'll show you my process for that. So we're gonna go ahead and we're going to create a new layer, and what we're gonna do is we're going to actually create a copy of everything that we currently see on the screen. So we're gonna go ahead and do that by hitting Shift, Option, Command, E. And then what that did is it created a new layer that contains all of this information below it. Okay, so now we have that. See, this layer looks exactly the same as the one below it. It has all this information. With layer 1 selected, what we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and create a layer mask by hitting this little layer mask button right here. So now we've turned this layer into another layer mask. And you can see it's white. That means we're seeing this layer everywhere. We don't want that. What we wanna do is make it so that we can't see this layer at all times. So again, Command I to flip that layer mask to black. Now we're not seeing this clone stamp layer. We're not seeing this exact duplicate of all this other stuff. And just like before, what we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and selectively apply this to the image only where we want it. But before we do that, we're actually gonna go back to looking at it. So go ahead and flip your layer mask back to white. I forgot one step, the most important step in the sharpening process, which is actually sharpening the image. So I'm gonna go ahead and flip it back to white just so we can see what we're actually doing. All right, so with layer 1 selected, we're gonna go ahead and go up to Filter. We are gonna go to Sharpen. We're gonna go to Unsharp Mask. Now this is gonna go ahead and actually sharpen the image. So I'm gonna go ahead and zoom in here a little bit. You can see what it's doing. If I turn the preview off and turn the preview on, it's sharpening it. And you can see what I was talking about earlier, where if you over sharpen the skin, especially a portrait, it does not look good on the skin, right? It really doesn't. But that's okay. What we want to do is we want to kind of go a little bit overboard, because again, we're going to be flipping that layer mask back to black so that you do not see this effect across the entire image, and then we're only going to apply it to where we want to apply it. So usually somewhere around 80 to 90% is going to be a good amount for your sharpening. A radius somewhere between 6 to 10 is going to look okay, and then just make sure your threshold is set to 0, and then you should be good to go. Mine is at 109 by default. That looks pretty good to me. I'm happy with that, so I'm gonna go ahead and hit OK to accept that change. And then now we've got this layer that's been sharpened all over. Again, go back to your layer mask, Command I to invert it, and now it's gonna hide that sharpening. We're not gonna see it anymore. And then just like before, we're gonna go to our layer mask and we're going to go ahead and paint white where we want to reveal the sharpening. Before I do that, I'm gonna click on layer 1. I'm gonna go ahead and rename that to sharpening just to make it easier to follow along with for you guys. Go ahead and hit enter to accept that. Layer mask selected, brush tool selected. Again, right now we've got a black layer mask. Our brush is set to black. We're gonna get X on the keyboard to flip that back to white. And again, we want opacity of 100%. We want a flow of about 5 or 10, because again, we wanna make this very subtle. And then we're gonna go ahead and with a very soft brush, go up to our eyes. I'm gonna go ahead and bring the brush size down a little bit, and I'm just gonna go ahead and start painting over her eye just a little bit right there, underneath, up above. I'm gonna go over, make a quick pass on her eyelashes right there, that looks good. Over her other eye, right underneath, that looks pretty good. I'm gonna come down to the lips, paint right above her upper lip, right above her, or right onto her lower lip, just like that. And that's about it. Now what I could do maybe as well, which I do sometimes I'll go over and add a little bit of sharpening to just a little bit of the hair, like right around here. It's usually pretty subtle, maybe just like that. And again, now while I was doing that, you maybe didn't even notice a change. Maybe it looks exactly the same to you. Again, the name of the game here is subtle. We don't want to go overly sharp, because if we do that, people are going to notice. It's going to look unnatural. She's going to look like an alien. We don't want alien models. We want human models that are just brought to life just a little bit more. So again, we're gonna go ahead and toggle this layer, and I can show you before and after. Now, if we do the before and after, you should be able to see a difference. If you can't, do it on your image that you're looking at in front of yourself. You should be able to notice it. I'm pretty sure you'll be able to see it in the video as well. You can see that her eyes clearly become a little bit sharper, and the same thing with her lips. Now, I'm actually thinking her lips are maybe a little bit too sharpened. So I'm gonna go back here, hit X on the keyboard, go back to a black brush, and then again, I'm gonna paint over those and just kind of lessen that effect a little bit. Now, if I toggle that layer, there's still some sharpening being applied to her lips. I just removed a little bit of it. So I basically cut down that layer mask reveal. It's not revealing as much of that layer beneath. And then so that way it reduces that effect. And that looks pretty good to me. And if it was still too much, what I could do is, like with any layer, I could go up here and go to opacity, and I could drag it to a lower opacity, which will lessen the effect that way as well. We'll talk more about that in a second. Okay, so here we are. We've gone through the big 3 processes for my edits in Photoshop. That's frequency separation, that's dodge and burn, and that's sharpening. Those are the big 3. Those are the ones I do on every image. Now, the next few steps are gonna be bonus steps. These are gonna be the steps you do when you really wanna make an image come alive, or you really wanna spend extra time and really go the extra mile to make it really come alive. I feel like I'm repeating myself. Anyway, let's just keep going and let's jump into some more techniques. So the next thing I want to talk to you guys about is going ahead and accentuating the eyes a little bit more. So I love it when the eyes pop. So what we're going to do is make her eyes pop just a little bit more. So in order to do that, we're going to create a new layer. Now, unlike layers before where we've just made copies of previous layers, we're actually going to create a new blank layer. So to do that, we're going to come down here to the bottom and we're going to hit this little page button with the upturned corner. That's going to give us a new layer. It's called layer 1. I'm going to go ahead and rename this to eyes. Again, just to make it easy to follow along with. Now again, hit B on your keyboard to select your brush tool, hit X in order to flip it to white. Actually, you can see here we've got white and we've got some other color that's not black. So we don't have our default colors. I'm gonna go ahead and hit D on the keyboard. That's gonna give us our default colors back, and then hit X again in order to flip it back to white. Now this time what I wanna do is I'm not painting white on a layer mask. I'm actually gonna go ahead and paint white on the image. And we're gonna do that right in her eyes, right over the whites of her eyes, and then right over this little reflection right here. So it's gonna look crazy at first, but just bear with me. It's gonna be fine in the end. So I'm literally painting white on the image, like white paint. So painting white over the white areas of her eyes, and I might even just do a little bit right there as well. Okay, then I'm gonna come over here, do the same thing for this eye, paint over that bright reflection, and then paint right here, and then maybe just a little bit there. I don't wanna go too crazy. Okay, that looks good, and maybe just a little bit right there. All right, cool. So obviously if you zoom back out, that just looks absolutely ridiculous. There's no way I'm leaving it like that. Trust me, I'm not crazy. All right, so what we're gonna do is with the eyes layer selected, we're gonna go up here to our blending mode, right where it says normal, hit that drop down. We're gonna come down here to not linear light, we're actually gonna go to soft light. Now you can see that already made a big difference. And if we turn it off and on, it still looks fake, it still looks ridiculous, but bear with me, it's gonna get better here in a second. So again, with the eyes layer selected, we're gonna go ahead and double click on the layer at the very right-hand side of the layer. So double click right here, and that's gonna bring up this layer style panel. So with this layer style panel opened up, what we're gonna do is go down here to this underlying layer slider, and we're gonna hold down the Option key on our keyboard, and we're gonna separate these two sliders. So we got a left half and we got a right half. Hold down the Option key and pull out the right half of that slider. And then we're gonna pull it to the right. And what that's going to do is it's gonna remove that effect from the darkest areas of the image. And then we're gonna pull it back this way as well. And let's go ahead and zoom in here so we can get a clear idea of what's going on. If I bring it all the way back, you can see as I bring this slider, well, let's separate these again. Option key again, hold down Option key, and you can select the right half of the slider. As I bring this to the right, you can see what's happening, right? You can see how it's removing white from the image, and it's removing it from the darkest areas of the image. So that's what we want to do. So we want to go ahead and bring that back and lessen that effect, and we're going to do the same thing with the other half, and just go until we get something that looks a little bit more natural. So that right there looks pretty good to me. I'm gonna hit OK. And then again, like anything else, we can go ahead and toggle back and forth and see if that looks good to us. Now that actually looks a little bit too much still. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go up here to the opacity. Whoops, went too far. I'm gonna go up here to the opacity. I hit this opacity drop down. I'm gonna bring it all the way to 0. And then what I'm gonna do is just incrementally bring it to the right until I get to an amount that looks okay. Again, I'm gonna go ahead and toggle that on and off. Now that actually right there starts to look pretty good to me. You're starting to see a little bit of the effect. It's definitely noticeable, it's definitely there. We've brought up the whites of her eyes just a little bit, and we've brought up that reflection just a little bit, but it's not overly done. And she doesn't look like an alien. And that's the main thing. You just want this to look very natural. When we zoom out a little bit further, again, it's a very subtle effect. Very subtle, but it's gonna go a long way in terms of making your image pop just a little bit more. So it's very subtle, but that's exactly what we want. That looks good to me. I'm gonna go ahead and leave that right there. And so now the eyes are done. Now, if we wanted to, we could go ahead and do the same thing for maybe her lips. If we wanted to, we could do it for some other areas of her face. I typically don't. I usually only do this for the eyes. I'll bring up that bright area right there, and that is usually good enough for me. If we wanted to, we can maybe try to bring out the color in her eyes a little bit more, but her eyes are pretty dark in this image. I think we'll struggle to make that happen. So I'm gonna go ahead and leave that alone. So we did the eyes, that looks really good to me. So now the next thing that we're gonna go ahead and do is we're going to work on the overall color balance of the image, the overall color toning of the image. So if you remember back in the Lightroom tutorial, we talked about split toning only for a brief second, and basically all I said about it was I don't use it in Lightroom. I pretty much do my split toning in Photoshop. So that's what we're gonna do next. We're gonna talk about how I do split toning in Photoshop and why I do it. So in order to do some split toning, the next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna create 2 more adjustment layers. So we're gonna go down here and go to our adjustment layer selection panel, click on that, and then we're gonna go up to color balance. All right, so now we have our color balance adjustment layer pulled up, and what we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and start to inject some blues into the shadows, because typically dark light tends to, or shadows tend to hold a lot of blue light. So we're gonna go ahead and emphasize a little bit more and kind of just bring that up even more. So what we're gonna do is with the mid-tone selected in our color balance adjustment layer, we're gonna go down here to our blue slider, and we're gonna drag this one just a little bit to the right into the blues, maybe go up here to the cyans and bring that to the left a little bit. Then we're gonna go to the shadows and do the same thing. We're gonna bring the blues to the right just a little bit, and then there we go. Now, that right there is too much of an effect, right? But that's okay. We're gonna go ahead, and what we're gonna do, because right now what we've done is we've applied blues to the shadows and we've applied blues to the midtones throughout the entire image. Now what we're gonna do is actually remove a little bit of that back. So the way we're gonna do that is we're going to use apply image again. So with our layer mask selected, what we're gonna do is we're gonna go up to image, we're gonna go to apply image, and if you remember from earlier, this is how we began to do our frequency separation layer for the texture. So this time we're gonna do things a little bit differently. So we want layer merge this time. So before we selected our color layer, we don't wanna do that. We want merge this time. We're gonna go down here to our blending layer, or blending mode rather, and rather than subtract, we want normal. Now in this particular case, because we're working with the shadows, what we wanna do is invert them. So we want our layer is merged, we want blending mode is normal, we want invert selected, and we want opacity 100%. Now we should be good. Go ahead and hit OK. And you're gonna see that it made a change to our layer mask. Now again, if you hold Option and click on your layer mask, you can see it full screen. And just like we've talked about before, anywhere you see white, it means the effect is being applied. Anywhere you see black, it means the effect is not being applied. So we can see in all the darkest areas of the image, like all the shadows within her hair, we see white on the layer mask, which means that that blue color is now being injected into the dark shadows within her hair, within the kind of the background, within the outside area of the background. So now we've got that blue being applied to just the darkest areas of the image. So we're gonna go ahead and hold down Option and hit our layer mask again in order to hide that layer mask and not make it full screen. Now, again, if we turn this layer on and off, we toggle it on and off, we can see there's a very, very big blue effect. It's still too much. So again, what we're gonna do is go to opacity, and just like with any layer that we have, any effect that we do in Photoshop, if you wanna lessen the effect of it, you can always go up to your opacity layer and slide it back. So we're gonna go ahead and do that. I'm gonna bring the opacity all the way back down to 0. And what I do is once I have it at 0, I just incrementally bring it up until I see, just basically get it to where I want it, right? So I'm gonna get it up to where I start to see the effect, but it's not overly done. And that right there is about good to me. You can see the effect, but it's not overly done. We've injected some blues, but it's not overly done. So I'm gonna go ahead and call that done, except for the one thing that I am gonna do is just go ahead and double click on color balance 1 and rename this to shadows. Okay, cool. So now we're gonna basically repeat this process again. We're gonna go down to our adjustment layer, go and select color balance. It's gonna create a new layer, and the only difference is this time with the midtones, instead of putting blue into the midtones, we're gonna put a little bit of yellow into our midtones. And then next thing we're gonna do is, rather than go to shadows, we're gonna go to highlights and do the same thing. We're gonna put a little bit of yellow into our highlights, and if we want to, we can put a little bit of red as well, because really what we're looking for is not really pure yellow. We want really more of an orange being applied to our highlights, because that's kind of more in line with natural skin tone. Now that looks pretty good to me. Now again, it's very overly done. That's a little bit too warm in my opinion. I would not leave the image like that. It's too warm. But again, we're gonna do the same thing. We're gonna go to our layer mask. We're going to do an apply layer, and we're going to apply that warm toning only to the highlights, which is gonna be primarily her face. So let's go ahead and, with our layer mask selected, go back up to image, go back to apply image. Now, just like with the shadows, we're gonna do the very same thing. We want our layer merged. We want our blending mode normal. The only difference is we're gonna uncheck the invert. Now what that means is it's going to apply this only to the brightest areas of the image. So we're gonna hit OK. Now with our layer mask selected, we can hit Option and click on our layer mask. It's gonna make our layer mask full screen. And then now again, remember, anywhere you see black, the effect is not being applied. Anywhere you see white, the effect is being applied. So now on our layer mask, you can see that it's applying this warm toning in a very nice gradient to the brightest parts of the image. So we can see the building behind, all along her face, within her eyes. Anywhere that's bright is having those bright areas are being injected with that yellow toning that we added to the image. And it's doing it in a very natural way, because you can see by this layer mask, it's got a very, very natural gradient to it, which is what we want. So again, with the Option key selected, we're gonna go over to color balance. We're gonna go to our layer mask, and we're gonna go ahead and select it. That way we can turn off that layer mask and not have it full screen anymore. And again, just like with the shadow layer, what we're gonna do is go to opacity. We're gonna bring the effect down to 0 and then start incrementally adding it back in until we get to an amount that we're happy with. And that's about good right there. I might bring it up just a touch more, maybe to about 40, 41. And again, this should be a very subtle effect, which it is. You guys might not even be able to see it in the video. I can certainly see it on my monitor. You should be able to see it on yours when you work through it, but it's a very subtle effect. Now let's go ahead and select, well, before we do that, let's go to color balance 1. We'll rename this to highlights. Cool, and then with highlights selected, hold down Shift. I'm going to go ahead and select shadows, then Command G to group them. And then I'm gonna go ahead and double click group 1 and rename that to toning. All right, cool. Now if we expand that, we've got our highlights and our shadow toning. This is essentially split toning, but we've done it now in Photoshop rather than in Lightroom, and we have a lot more control over doing it here because we can adjust things like opacity. We can also go in, we can readjust the layer mask. Say for example, we wanted to remove the blue from all the highlights, we could go ahead and select our layer mask, hold down Option, select our layer mask, and if we wanted to, we could go in here and we can modify this layer mask. So if we really wanted to make sure it's only showing up in the darkest area of the image, if we wanted no blue on our face, for example, we could go ahead and hit the brush tool, make sure we're painting with black, which we are. And then what I could do is go ahead and go in here with the brush tool and then just start with a very soft brush, start painting black over her face and really removing even more of that blue from her face. That way it's really not being applied to your face at all. And again, I'm just doing this with a very low flow. So this is a very subtle effect. But if you really wanted to go in here and modify this more, you could. We can maybe remove it from this area, remove it from here, remove it from this part. So again, this gives you a lot more flexibility than if you were to do it in Lightroom. This is the reason why I do it here. And right now I'm just kind of messing around, just kind of showing you guys an example. I'm not actually too concerned with the blue in this image. I think it looks fine. So I'm gonna go ahead and flip this back, Option, hit my layer mask, turn it back off. But again, if we turn that back on and off, we can see the effect. And now we've got blue only being applied to the darkest area of the image. And if we go ahead and hit our toning group and we turn that on and off, you should see that the image overall looks a lot more contrasty. And that's the reason why I really like to do it, is it adds a little bit more color contrast. And I always find that when I do this, I always love the look of the image afterwards. I feel like it makes it, again, the only way I can really describe it is it makes it more color contrasty. And I really happen to like that. And again, before, after, it looks really good. The other reason why I do it is I tend to feel like most images have too much of a yellow tint to them, and it's a yellow tint that's spread across the entire image. And by going in here and adding a little bit of blue into the shadows, it pulls that effect back a little bit. And again, it increases that contrast and makes the image pop just a little bit more. It makes the colors pop a little bit more and seem a little bit more vibrant, a little bit more saturated. I happen to really like that look. If you don't happen to like it, don't do it. This is just what I do for my images, and I happen to really like it. Now, this right here is really pretty much the extent of most of the edits that I do in Photoshop. And this is pretty much my finishing point. This is where, like, for me, this is an image I would be happy with posting to Instagram or throwing on my website or delivering to a client. So this is pretty much where I would typically finish my edit. So let's go ahead and actually select everything we've done in Photoshop so far. So with toning selected, I'm gonna go down here, hold down Shift, select the frequency separation group. Now we can go through and we can actually turn off all these layers at once and turn them all back on again. So this is what the image looked like right out of Lightroom, and then this is what it looks like once we've finished up in Photoshop. So it's a subtle difference. It's not drastic, it's subtle, but it's definitely noticeable at the same time. And that's what we're really looking for. We're not trying to go over the top. We're not trying to like really make this image look like something else. We're not trying to make her look like a cartoon or like make her look like something that's like unreal or whatever. That's not my style of editing. My style of editing is definitely very much so trying to make the image come alive and just pop a little bit more without being too overdone. So that's really about it, guys. This is really the end of what I would typically do for a Photoshop edit. So at this point, what I would do is I would come up here to File and hit Save, and then what would end up happening is this image will then be recatalogued with all of these Photoshop changes back into Lightroom with the rest of your photos from that shoot, and then you can go ahead and start cropping and exporting those photos into whatever file structure you have for then dispersing to your social media accounts, to your clients, wherever that may be. And so that's really gonna be it for this video, guys. I've got nothing more to tell you in this one. I've pretty much gone through everything that I typically do on like 95% of my edits. The only other things I might do is if there's some crazy thing in the background I absolutely have to remove, I might go and do that, but that's very rare. And I think this is gonna be a great starting off point for the majority of the people watching this video. If you're just getting started with techniques like frequency separation and dodging and burning and those sorts of things for your portraits, I think this is gonna give you a great head start. It's gonna give you a great starting point to really start taking your portraits to the next level as far as an editing situation is concerned. So I hope you guys found these two videos very useful. I hope you'll be able to apply them to your own images and really create some really beautiful work that you really love. I know I have a ton of fun doing it. And if you guys have any questions, by all means, hit me up, send me an email, DM me on Instagram, leave a comment down below in this video, whatever you want to do. And I will definitely try to get back to you if I can. Just give me a heads up, send me a message somewhere, anywhere. I'll do my best to get back to you guys. And other than that, that's gonna be it for this video. So take care, keep shooting. I'll catch you guys in the next one. And have fun. Go add some photos. I'm gonna go eat some dinner.